Not a huge deal in this matchup, right? Obviously
I
never
mean,
good, but
well, the important thing is hitting your land drops.
right.
So if he's able to continue hitting land drops, then it's fine.
Okay.
But I mean, being down a card significantly decreases your ability to stay like at parity with your opponent.
Okay. So here's a thought seize from Brad Nelson. And he sees
He sees
divination.
Thoughtseize, Elspeth, Jace, divination.
And is that a gainsay up there near the top, or is that just a land? Just an island? Just an island. All right.
I think it's just an island.
It's just an island as well, yeah.
Plenty of lands here for his opponent. He's going to go ahead and take that Thoughtseize.
So this is a game 3 here for we're calling it the Brattle. And it's an Esper control mirror that was won last game by a particularly devastating play.
Yes, a Notion Thief came down.
In response to a Sphinx's Revelation, only for 2, but that's all it took.
I mean, that's a pretty massive swing.
Huge swing. Also, that Notion Thief did like 9 or 12 damage to Brad Nelson.
That's pretty good value for 4 mana. 9 damage, going up 4 cards.
Gainsay. So he's going to fight the fight early here and land a Jace. And as we've seen every time from Brad, he instantly minuses. It makes a lot of sense on this board. There's no threat. But we've seen him do it even if there's a 2-power creature on the other side of the battlefield. So he sees all lands, but that's kind of what Brad wants to see at this stage of the game. Just keep hitting those land drops like you mentioned a minute ago, Jake. And now we have dueling Jace Architects of Thought. This one's a lot different of a split, though. It's a Land of Dissolve and a Sphinx's Revelation. I mean...
Yeah, a hard counterspell and a Revelation being in the same flip. You're definitely going to separate those two, but it's pretty hard to decide how you want to be splitting them. I mean, basically whichever 2-card pile you give your opponent, that's the one he's taking, I imagine. Yep. I like that split. I like splitting the Revelation.
Why do you like that? I mean, doesn't the land go really well with the Revelation?
The land goes well with the Revelation. Hitting your land drops is important. But the thing is that having the hard counter is super, super important. And once you get to the late game, it really doesn't matter how many big cards you have because all that matters is, the one that's resolving on the one big turn.
I see.
So Brad is more thinking in terms of how the explosive turn is going to go as opposed to
just raw power level.
Yeah. And there, the Mutavault pressuring that Jace gets to attack the Planeswalker. One of the very best parts about the Mutavaults in this deck is their ability to pressure enemy Planeswalkers, whether they be Domri Raid or Jace Architect of Thoughts.
Right.
So Mr. Grant attempting to get to the point in the game where he can make good use of that Sphinx's Revelation.
That's right, but he's going to start things off with Sin Collector to sort of clear the way here. Apparently only has one target, which is Revoke Existence, leaving Brad Nelson with Land Detention Sphere Jace Architect of Thought, which is, of course, knowledge that Brad Grant can use down the stretch here, but no instants, no responsive spells there. Jace draws cards.
Yeah. Let's take a look. And
Dark Betrayal. Land. Detention Sphere. Now he knows that Brad Nelson already has a Detention Sphere in his hand.
But that Dark Betrayal has a good amount of applications. I mean, Brad, when he's going to go Revelation and leave open that Temple of Deceit, what he wants to be doing is representing both Betrayal and Dispel at the same time. That way, he can try to play the counter war with that Dispel or kill the Notion Thief if it gets played in response.
Sure.
I think having access to both of those lines is pretty important, and he's probably only got one Betrayal in his deck post-board in this matchup, so he just wants to have that option available to him. At this point, he is playing a lot of, just stuff.
Playing a lot of stuff. Jacob Van Lunen, 2014. All right, another Jace hits the battlefield here for Brad, and it's going to reveal a pair of dissolves, and what is that in the middle? Gainsay?
That is a Gainsay.
So triple hard counter here.
It's pretty nice. Pretty nice. And in many ways, you'd rather have these hard counters in your hand than the Revelations. The major issue here is that, Brad is up against this Sin Collector.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see whether or not he decides whether or not to Dark Betrayal the Sin Collector to save the Jace. I don't think he's going to, though.
You think he's more worried about that?
About the
Notion
potential
Thief?
Notion Thief down the line? Ooh, gives Brad a pair of Dissolves.
He does do it, though.
He does just go ahead and do that.
And Brad must just recognize here that, look, he's going to take 10 or 12 from that thing over the course of the game. It doesn't.
And he's also going to lose this Jace, so he's going to lose cards for it,
Sure,
too. I
totally.
mean, the damage, I don't think he's necessarily worried about. That,
Okay.
That kind of just will come back eventually.
Okay. I mean, it's just like it was weird because in game 2, he threw his Jace into two Sin Collectors and was like, sure.
Yeah, and I don't think he was necessarily happy
Sure.
to do that.
Sure. But now that he has the option not to, he's going to take it.
Sure, yeah.
Makes sense. So back on Brad Grant's side of the table now. Thoughtseize. Well, we know some of the cards in Brad's hand. Double Dissolve, sinks his Revelation.
And the
of
Attention
course,
Sphere.
the
That's a
Attention
nice
Sphere.
hand.
That is a nice hand. No lands, but he's got a Jace there if he wants to draw some cards.
Yeah, he's going to be left just with 3 cards in hand against his opponent's 5 cards. But he does still have this Jace in play, so only relevant. Going to draw first turn also. Not too far behind. You see that there, his opponent takes one of the 2 dissolves.
Gives him 2, takes 1 back away.
Biting the hand that feeds.
And another Jace for Brad Grant. He's going to minus his Jace since he's facing... Oh, I guess there's a Mutavault over there for Brad Nelson, isn't there?
There is.
Interesting. Elspeth, 2 lands. And Brad Grant wants the lands.
Yeah. And I think Brad Nelson is fine with that.
Temple of Enlightenment. And that's going to go back on top, so Brad Grant found something he likes up there. I'm assuming Brad Nelson's first order of business is just taking out Jace with his Mutavault.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I'd
so
be
hard
very
to turn that
surprised
down.
if he turned down that
I mean,
opportunity. I mean,
he does
sure.
have Brad Grant tapped out here.
Yeah, so I mean, if he has another untapped land to go with something like an Aetherling off the top, but we know he doesn't have an untapped land to go with Aetherling because he just showed us his hand.
Mm-hmm.
He could hypothetically dig for that with his Jace, but yeah, he's just going to go ahead and pass the turn. He knows that his opponent's just going to untap and have access to something like Elspeth, so he really doesn't want to be tapping low himself here. This Mutavault advantage has been pretty huge for Brad Nelson here. Two lands or 1 land, which is a Mutavault. It's a good split there.
I like that.
Yeah. It's the only realistic split. I imagine Brad's just going to take the 2 lands. I mean, he's still sitting here on, just 7 lands, and I know just 7 lands is, a bit of a misnomer. But
No,
when
but
you're playing an Esper mirror, it is very much about, having those lands.
right.
Here he is, just scrawling things away to the bottom, optimizing his hand. Ooh, and he's going to get aggressive here with this Mutavault.
Six's Revelation gets immediately dispelled.
Yep.
No, sir.
This does, however, open Brad up to getting Elspeth with counter magic backup. I'm sure Brad's, not too unhappy with a detention sphere getting at Jace that's already been activated twice.
He got a lot of mileage out of that, Jace. I'm sure he's fine with that, yeah.
All right. Mutavault continuing to apply pressure here on Brad Grant. Brad Nelson with a grip full of goodies. And Brad Grant does, in fact, have Gainsay backup for Elspeth Sun's Champion this turn, if he so desires. But on the other side of the table, there is 6 open mana, and Brad has a hand of 4 or 5 cards. So it's dangerous.
He's not going to do anything, it looks like.
Yeah, well, tapping out is very, very dangerous. I mean, in a matchup like this.
And here we go, the Mutavault plan again. We see this happen time and time again.
It just shows us how big Mutavault is in this format.
It's
insane.
Just
such an important part of this game.
Yeah, it is completely insane.
It's one of the better skill testers in the standard format also.
How do you mean?
The ability to know when you're supposed to be attacking with your Mutavault, when you're supposed to be blocking with it. So all of those factors.
When to risk it.
Yeah, what
losing
order to
your
play your lands in.
Mm-hmm. Brad Nelson, we know what plan he's on here. Here's a divination for Brad Grant. That resolves.
Yeah, I think you've got to let a card like divination resolve at this stage of the game.
Uh-huh. Bigger fish to fry.
Exactly. So, we saw Brad counter a divination early on in game 2. That was mostly a result of, I think he assumed that he might be just trying to get his opponent to hiccup on lands, which worked, but he just lost to a Nation Thief anyway. Here, there's really no value to that. You really just want to be countering counters and big spells.
Mm-hmm.
So Brad Grant now decides to leave the card on top. It doesn't necessarily bode well for Nelson.
No.
Lots of cards being left on top for Grant.
Indeed. Lots of cards in hand for both players.
Let's see. Brad may decline to attack with the Mutavault now.
So what's the thinking there?
I mean, his opponent just left the card on top, drew 2 extra cards. This is conceivably the turn where he can be expecting, or I guess maybe his next end step is where he expects his opponent to start to pick the counterfight. Because he knows his opponent has the Revelation, so he can expect the counter war to begin on his own end step.
Looks like Brad's going to pick his own counterfight here.
Interesting.
Yeah. He's going to play an Elspeth Sun's Champion. Force Brad to respond here, and Brad does. He's going to play a Dissolve. Brad Grant, excuse me.
Yeah, and Nelson knows that Brad Grant has the Gainsay. I believe, from a Jace that was activated in the very early turns of the game.
Okay.
So as a result, he'd be pretty hard pressed to play another counter here.
But there it is.
He's going to.
He's
okay.
got to dispel.
So gainsay from Brad Grant will force Brad to have another counter spell.
And he does. It's a dissolve.
Yeah, but now Brad is tapped out here.
Brad's tapped out, but he has Elspeth on the battlefield. So
yeah, but I mean,
what's the big comeback play here for Brad?
All right, so an Elspeth from the other end.
Okay, Elspeth fight, but Brad Nelson's the one who gets to have his Elspeth first.
Yeah. I mean, there's no Aetherling on the other side of the table.
Nelson can live with this, right?
Yeah. I mean, he might be able to make it out of this situation in a pretty good spot, even.
I mean, the first one to ultimate Elspeth has the advantage, right? Yeah, he can also just do this. Attack Elspeth for 3.
Yeah, and I mean, Brad's definitely just going to block with his 3 tokens.
I actually let it take it. Interesting. So
see, that's really, really interesting to me. I'm not really sure what that means. Just going to...
Looks like Brad's thinking that through as well. Sphinx's Revelation for 5. Counterfight. Negate. Dissolve. Resolves. And Brad Nelson gets a Sphinx's Revelation through as well. So now he's got Elspeth. He still has an activation of Elspeth to go here as well. And he gets to reload his hand, leaving his opponent, Brad Grant, with just 1 card in hand. Make some tokens. And pass. So Brad Nelson seems to have put himself in a really nice spot here. It's going to take something pretty great from Brad Grant's side of the table to get himself out of this. Nelson's going to trade tokens for tokens. I mean, his Elspeth's at 6. His opponent's is only at 3. And here's a Thoughtseize from Brad Nelson. It's going to get dissolved, because may as well scry.
Yep. That's one of the nice things about Thoughtseize in this matchup is that it just, as the game goes late, it's not a bad card because it just, it's the ability to make sure that your opponent has to use one of their hard counters on it.
Right. Brad's going to attack Elspeth for 3 lethal damage, but that's just going to prompt Brad Grant to trade them off, and we're going to do this Elspeth dance for a while longer. But again, Brad Nelson's Elspeth is now on 7 counters, and he has his opponent with no cards in hand. And there's the Sphinx's Revelation for Brad Nelson. 1, 2, 3, 116 cards he just drew. How the heck is Brad Grant supposed to come back from this?
Doesn't look likely.
I mean, he's just buried here, right? I mean, what if he draws Sphinx's Revelation for his turn? Does that help? It's like his best draw still. No, that's going to do it. Brad Grant extends the hand, and Brad Nelson's going to advance to the semifinals here. And you see onlookers clapping as much for relief as for support.
2010 Player of the Year, Brad Nelson, advancing to the semifinals here. Brad Grant qualifying for the Pro Tour here.
What a great
Pretty
run
exciting.
for Brad Grant there.
Great deck choice, too. It's pretty clear looking at this top 8 that Esper